The C4 ZR1 was fast. The C6 ZR1 was brash. The C7, well, it was out of this world, setting a new lap record at the Virginia International Raceway, destroying the previous record holder, a freaking Ford GT, and punishing the limits of what a front-engine rear-wheel drive Corvette could actually do. The C8 ZR1, well, it's an even more extreme version of the already supercar slaying mid-engine Z06, and it's hitting the streets, and it's every other supercar owner's worst nightmare. This is everything you need to know to feel the speed of the C8 ZR1. Let's go.
Real quick, we have to give thanks to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. Now, one of my favorite things about Factor is I get chef-prepared meals on the table in 2 minutes. No shopping, cooking, or cleanup required. So I can spend more time in the garage. And since I travel a lot for automotive events, Factor is flexible. I can change my order every week with plans from 4 to 18 meals weekly, or even pause or reschedule my deliveries anytime. It's kind of a no-brainer. Factor is cheaper than overpriced takeout, it's delicious, and I mean that, I'm not just saying it, and in 2 minutes, I have nutritional, tasty meals that take the effort of figuring out what to eat completely out of the equation. They offer meal plans that help you meet your goals, from focusing on increasing protein to vegan and vegetarian options to meals that help you control your calories and even a keto plan. Plus, Factor has smoothies and fruit juices too that are great between meals or when you just need a quick pick-me-up. Head to Factor75 or click the link below and use the code IdealOffer50 to get 50% off your first Factor box plus 20% off your next 4 boxes. That's code IdealOffer50 at Factor75.com to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month of orders. Now, back to the ZR1.
See, here's what's going on. Chevy has released 2 teaser videos for the upcoming Corvette ZR1, and as for the most recent one, there are a few huge things that we can confirm with 99% certainty. Firstly, judging from the previous generation of ZR1s, well, it's not unthinkable for Chevy to put forced induction on one of these things, right? I mean, GM is not afraid to slap a blower on top of a big old V8 and hand you the keys to a car that's more powerful than a European supercar, and of course, you knew that. But what this second video reveals is it's not just forced induction, and it's not just superchargers, it's turbocharging.
And no, we don't have it in writing from GM that the new ZR1 is going to be turbocharged. But after the team here at Ideal watched it, and after our friends at Road and Track gave us their 2 cents, well, we can all but confirm this thing has at least 1 turbocharger on it, and there's more than a decent chance there'll actually be 2. So why is this important? Well, turbocharging is actually a very dynamic way to...
Wait, shut up, dude. There's actually more news on this video that needs to be known before all that technical BS. And what is that, you ask? Well, if you have a well-trained automotive ear and you hear this sound, you might say, hey, that's a flat-plane crank V8, isn't it? Yeah, and guess what? Here at Ideal, we'd have to completely agree with you. And if you agree with me, well, hit that like button, because that soundbite sounds more Italy than it does American. And once again, you can hear the swooshing spooling sound of what is almost certainly at least 1 turbocharger. So for real this time, why is a flat plane crank and turbocharger such a big deal? Well, the main thing that comes to mind is engine performance. Flat plane engines love to rev. They are very quick to respond, and one with 8 or more cylinders typically likes to make its power high in the rev range. Past supercharged Corvette engines were all traditional cross-plane crank engines that make that deeper, more burbling tone, and they made a ton of low to mid-range torque because of the nature of the engine design. But this time around, they are creating a very new formula, and that formula is high-end, high-revving power with turbochargers on top of it. And that, my friends, well, is how you make ridiculous amounts of track-ready performance. So far, the rumors about the new ZR1's output is around 800 or more. Remember, the last ZR1 pumped out 755 horses. And do you think that GM's gonna build a new generation sports car with less power? Hell no, bro. This thing is poised to be freaking insane in a straight line. But if we dig a little bit deeper, there's the question of how GM has made that engine work. As Trav explained in our previous ZR1 vid, which you should definitely check out our sister channel up here, flat plane crank engines are typically built with lightweight parts that are meant to move fast, but not necessarily always handle a ton of stress. And we're concerned that if GM did decide to use that 5.5 liter flat plane crank V8 out of the Z06, that they'd run into reliability issues when giving it a ton of boost. But with this presumed news of the ZR1 being turbocharged, that means that the most likely direction that GM went was with an all-new engine. An engine that took the flat plane crank formula of the LT6 from the Z06, kept what worked and made it pair seamlessly with the turbocharger setup. And that would entail a ton of revisions from the fuel system to oil circulation, possible valve train work, and definitely some magic in the bottom end. And after all is said and done, a refreshed LT6 style engine with turbos could easily see the alien number of what has been rumor. GM also did some subtle wordsmithing in the video. They use phrases like unthinkable speed is coming. That makes me think that this will be the fastest Corvette of all time, or at least set a completely new benchmark for what Corvette's performance going forward is. And if you're a fan of previous ZR1s, you'll be happy to see that in the teaser video, the rendered ZR1 flyby shows a big wang is back. It looks tall, wide, and poised to shove that rear into the pavement. It also confirms that it has that classic center exit exhaust that we have come to expect in the Vette. But speaking of expectations, what exactly have we come to expect with the ZR1? Because this car goes back further than you might remember. The ZR1's formula has been ever changing, but what's always been at its core is being the baddest, hottest, and nastiest Vette money can buy. And in 1970, the very first ZR1 proved that. This version of the C3 Corvette was actually not its own nameplate back then. You see, the ZR1 was just a performance package for the base car, which included the iconic LT1 5.7 liter V8, a mega hefty 4-speed M22 transmission, better brakes, improved cooling, and more finely tuned suspension. And that LT1 put in some work. Let me tell you, it had a compression ratio of 11:1 and made 370 horsepower coupled with 380 foot-pounds of torque. Crazy thing is, those figures were understatements. Rumor has it that this thing made considerably more from the factory. And back in 1970, you could get that all for a depressingly cheap $1,010.50. But truth is, most people didn't want a car like that back then. GM removed luxuries like power windows, defrosters, power steering, AC, and even a radio when offering the ZR1, and that made it just a touch too hardcore for most folks. In fact, less than 60 were ever produced, and I think that makes that ZR1 10 times cooler. But it really makes you think about what customers are willing to give up for performance. Importantly, the upcoming ZR1 will probably also face this dichotomy. Will they pull a full Mustang GTD and make it a barely street-legal race car, or go a more Porsche GT3 route that suits the road just as well as the track? But hey, they had like 50 plus years to figure it out, so I'm sure it'll be fine. Anyways, 20 years later, we got the C4 ZR1. This is where the ZR1's king of the hill attitude really became known. And it was all thanks to Lotus. Yep, that Lotus. These guys helped GM take what would have been a financial disaster and turned it into a, slightly less intense financial disaster. They designed the new LT5 V8 and helped GM develop a new braking system, steering system, and the active Bilstein suspension setup that was only found on stuff like the Porsche 959 at the time. The engine itself was no small feat. It was all aluminum, had dual overhead cams, and it was the first non-pushrod V8 ever to be put into a Corvette. It made 375 horsepower and then was bumped up to 405 just 3 years after its debut. 0 to 60 was over in just 4.5 seconds, and if you kept it pinned, you could reach a death-defying 180 miles per hour. What was Ford doing at this time? Well, they were selling 5.0 Mustangs to police departments around the US. Maybe they could catch the ZR1, but probably not. GM, on the other hand, they were running from the cops, like literally. The C4 ZR1's front clip and radiator were designed with a raked back angle that kept police radars from detecting it until it was too late to catch you. Now that's what the ZR1 is all about. Okay, next is the C5. And I'm joking because they never built a C5 ZR1. Yeah, the actual next car is the C6 ZR1, debuting in 2009. This is when it got ridiculous. This time around, the ZR1 sported a hand-built 6.2-liter supercharged LS9 V8 and put down 638 horses. This was the first factory supercharged Corvette in existence. Fittingly, the first Corvette to hit 200 miles per. Everything from the huge Brembo brakes to the magnetic suspension to the carbon fiber body pieces to the added comfort made this Corvette not just the most feared sports car in America, but maybe in the entire world. It beat the Ferrari 599 GTB in a comparison test and could easily outrun the best from Porsche, BMW, and Mercedes with a 0 to 60 time in the low 3s. It was, in one word, terrifying. I guess what I'm saying is that I wouldn't be surprised if they had to replace some of those seats on those press cars back in the day. The C8 ZR1 set the standard really high for GM if they ever wanted to try this again. And of course, try they did. In 2019, it introduced us to a supercharged 755 horsepower LT5 engine that was made specifically for this car. In a straight line, this car was a demon. 60 miles per hour was over with in just 2.85 seconds, and the quarter mile was done in just 10.6. But the ZR1, as you know, is made for the track, baby. The suspension setup was the most aggressive in the Corvette's history and tuned for extreme race conditions, while being livable on the street if you were crazy enough to drive it on public roads. The optional high downforce rear wing provided a whopping 950 pounds of downforce at high speeds, and allowed this car to set the production car lap record at Virginia International Raceway with a time of 2 minutes and 37 seconds and some change. And probably my favorite thing about this car is the ZR1 screams so loud that GM had to install additional mufflers so that it wouldn't exceed the Nürburgring's 100 decibel limit. Talk about establishing dominance. Okay, so where does that leave us with the new ZR1 that's coming out this summer? Well, as far as we can tell, the C8 ZR1 is likely to be a culmination of every single ZR1 before it. It'll take the basic C3 formula and undoubtedly be a limited production top-of-the-line Corvette. Then, it will take the tech-forward engine design mantra of the C4 with its all but confirmed flat-plane crank turbocharged V8. Then, it'll make sure to be a terrifying straight-line monster just like the C6. And, most importantly, it'll incorporate the track dominance of the C7 with wild aero, race-spec suspension, and carbon fiber bits. I mean, we have to remember what GM uses the Corvette for: racing. The C7R race car, for example, is a legit Le Mans winning race car, and the C4 Corvette race cars were banned from SCCA racing for being too dominant. There is true motorsports heritage within the Corvette name, and the ZR1 has always been the closest the public can get. The only main difference here is going to be the C8's mid-engine layout, which will provide an even stronger basis for GM to dominate the racing circuits. At the end of the day, all I can say is that we here at Ideal are pumped to see this thing hit showroom floors and, more importantly, the track later this summer. The Corvette is one of the most ridiculous machines that has been released this year. From the Mustang GT-D to the hybrid 911 to the Nismo Z, we can't wait to see who will be crowned the baddest of them all. But if the ZR1 is anything like we expect it to be, well, those other cars might want to watch the f out. Yeah, and you might want to look out for more ZR1 vids here at Ideal, because we're going to be following this thing all year and keeping you up to date with the freshest info. So, what are your thoughts on the new ZR1? Will it be stupidly expensive and only useful on the track, or will we see a bunch of them on the street come next year? Let us know down below, and remember to like, subscribe, turn on that notification bell, because we're going to keep you updated on ZR1 and all other Ideal content. So, if you enjoyed this video, well, check out some of our other Ideal vids over here. I'm Brad, this is Ideal, see you next week, and promise me one thing: keep living the Ideal lifestyle.